where top real estate agents tell how they do it. The top real estate agent in Aspen, Colorado. And I mean, just slightly entertaining. But Steven, thank you for being here. So good to see you today.
It's always good to see you, Jerry, and I'm happy to be here. This is always interesting and thought-provoking and fun, so I'm excited.
Well, thank you. So, everybody and Steven, to give you a little reminder, your first interview with us was episode 152. And we talked about how to break into a top market because, side note, we say this all the time, but Aspen, Colorado, I think is still the most expensive real estate in the country. It's up there in the world. And you guys have the highest per square foot price, highest sales prices. So we talked about, and you have more real estate agents than closings. That's
Well,
saying a lot.
with a average sale price of, and it fluctuates, but anywhere from 12 to $15 million, it is enticing for somebody to go get their license because one deal can be a life changer for that person. That being said, you're right. There's a lot of brokers here. As a matter of fact, if you're driving and you get pulled over by a cop, they don't ask for your driver's license. They ask for your broker's license. Not everybody's got a driver's license.
Now, let's put this into context. Really, there's more broker's licenses than driver's licenses. So,
I would think so.
and we talked about, just so everybody listening knows, we have episode, the first one you were on, round one. This is round 3 today, was how to become a top real estate agent for the high net worth client. And you had some great stories about the conversations you had, kind of how it turned into business. And then episode 3, I think it was 306, was how to be a top agent in the highest price points of luxury. Now, today, we kind of thought, let's talk about, I mean, this business is not easy, and you're in this competitive market, and you just continue to kill it.
Well, thank you. You know, success is relative. Naturally, I'm a shameless self-promoter in a snow globe community. So there's only 7,000, 8,000 residents here. And interestingly, you've got newspapers here. So in the global world, print is dead here. It's very much alive. You've got the Aspen Times and the Aspen Daily News, and I am guilty of being a shameless self-promoter, and that has allowed me to stay on top of my game and stay as the top real estate. Annually, I'm either number 1, 2, or 3. Now, it's not by mistake. It comes with hard work, but really, Jerry, it's the willingness to reinvest in my clients and in myself. And I have this strategy, and I call it an incremental strategy. And what that means is if I take 8 consecutive pages in Aspen magazine and it costs me $25,000, and remember, the magazine comes out 4 times a year, so you can imagine my commitment to this magazine. But one insert, 8 pages, Stephen Shane specific, my listings, 25,000 plus or minus.
This is what magazine? 25,000?
Yeah. As a matter of fact,
Okay.
why don't you grab, Stephanie, an Aspen magazine and hand it to me, and I'll just show. Thank you. So here's Aspen magazine. And if I open it, it's not going to be great, but here is a
Look
gatefold.
at that. I love it.
Okay. So 25,000 plus or
Right.
minus. So why am I willing to do that? Because let's face it, that's a tough pill to swallow. And that goes back to this incremental strategy. And as I mentioned earlier, if the average sale price, let's use $12 million to be fair, of a home, 12 million, say 2.5% on 12 is $300,000 in
Well,
commissions.
remember, it could be anything, right?
Yes, it's negotiable.
Right.
Compensation, not
Well, we can
commissions.
go into that because that whole thing, it's negotiable. Well, of course, as the United States of America, yeah, it's negotiable. Now, the real estate agent decides whether their personal commission is negotiable. I think we should land hard on that one, in my opinion. But Anyway, when that comes
And
up, we always have to have this conversation.
of course it is. I mean, the more business you do, the more valuable you are to the mothership, right?
Yeah.
So 12 million, 25%, 300,000. Um, and then my split, it doesn't make a difference. At the end of the day, pretend just use the 300,000. Why am I willing to commit $25,000? One incremental sale, one sale that wouldn't have taken place otherwise. Okay, it's 10x, 12x is the difference between
Yeah.
25,000 and a 300,000, a $250,000 commission. So not only is it rolling the dice there, you're appeasing your clients. They're seeing their properties listed in this luxury magazine. You are out there in front of the public. So other Aspen residents and second homeowners are seeing your investment in your clients. So if they're considering listing a home, then they may very well call me with this premier position. So it's this incremental sale mentality that has allowed me to grow my business.
It's yeah, it's like one realizing it really is one step at a time.
Listen, I came here, and I mean this, 30 years ago with nothing. So all of the brokers here, 850 brokers, are either starting where I started or they're on first base or second base already. They may have come here with something. I don't have any magic sauce. This is outworking my competitors, being more creative than my competitors, and a willingness to invest, and it's a lot of money in my clients and my own business.
So you outwork your competitors and be more creative than your competitors. What does that really mean?
That's a great question. And I love it because, people make statements that can be unfounded or they're sound bites. Okay. So here's what it means. If I come into the office, and by the way, I'm in the office. So that's number one, because I may be the only person in my office right now. So people work when they have a task in front of them. I come in the office, I have a task that's easily accomplished. What's difficult is manifesting business, creating business, having a clean slate in front of myself, a clean slate in front of me, and no assignment. How do I go get business? So that transcends into the creative component. What can I do that's going to generate business? And that's hard. So I'll tell you that right now, I have acquired a list of RIAs, SFOs, MFOs. So the C-suite or the principals of those three initials. For those of you who don't know what those three initials stand for, by the way, I may not have known 6 months ago either. It's registered investment agents, single family offices, and multiple family offices. So if you wanted to do an email campaign, the greatest way when you're in luxury would be to reach a bunch of billionaires who are interested in skiing, more specifically, maybe Aspen, etc. There are ways of acquiring some of these names, but it's limited. And very often those email addresses are not great. If I can reach these C-suite people, okay, so C-suite being the chief marketing officer, chief financial officer, chief investment officer, or the actual principals of these companies, who in turn have clients investing with them who, for sake of illustration, let's say, have balances of $50 million plus. I can then email my 125 Rooney Circle listing for 125 million. I can email them my 41 Popcorn Lane listing at 59 million.
41
Shameless.
Popcorn Lane. Are you just making sure we're listening?
I promise you that's the address.
Is it really?
And this same owner has a place not at 38, but in Palm Beach. He also owns the Penthouse in the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan, and he owns this and other property here. So Popcorn Lane, butter, salt, movie, whatever you want, $59 million property. The point is, this is a creative strategy that takes work. So once you've assembled this list of 30,000 plus people you're going to email to, then you have to compose a compelling email. And look, there's no guarantee. It's a lot of time and energy, but it's different than what any other broker is doing.
Well, what's different is who you're emailing and how you got the email addresses and what you're putting in the email. But also, we've had conversations about this before. It's a lot more than an email that gets the business done. Now, maybe sometimes it's not, but in your case, it's probably a lot of stuff that happened before to make who the email came from matter and what's in the email relevant and it more openable. But all of that aside, there's 5 questions in that. I'm going to ask you a couple. What makes that email great? And what else do you do to enhance the stickability of what you're doing with emails or whatever you're doing that's creative that cultivates this ongoing? Because this is really, at this point, we've got the podcast 152 and 306 that really talk about, and we could revisit that a lot as well. Let's do. I don't want to say we're not going to, but there are these things you've done to cultivate this business. This is what you're doing to continue to grow it. What really makes it work now, though? What's the difference now? I think a lot of people think you get going and you're just coasting. I don't know that you ever are,
Oh my
right?
God.
There are things you do that have more power, but tell us.
So there is messaging and then there is reach. So an email campaign is a perfect example. Even if, as you astutely stated, you have the ability to reach these 33,000 C-suite financial investor people, that message has to resonate. How do you email a message that is going to get their attention? So I don't want to get too into this, but the subject line of the
Our
email
listeners
reads
probably
something,
do.
my goodness. What does $500 million buy you in Aspen? Was my subject line. Okay. I think that most people are going to open that email. And then I created a luxury digital brochure. I call it Allure. I came up with that name because Aspen Luxury Real Estate, those letters are all within Allure. Nobody knows that. I didn't bold out those specific,
Oh,
okay,
wow.
but
Yeah.
that was, and then, you don't want to overwhelm people with tons of copy. Everybody's got a limited attention span. So if I've gotten that far where they're actually within the email, I want it to be concise and exciting. I don't lose the fact that Aspen is a luxury resort destination. Living here for 30 years, you can lose sight of that. And it is a luxury resort destination, both winter and summer. So, to your point, yes, it's not just reach, but it's also content. Then, when we get back to investing in yourself, there are things that I do that have me perceived as a luxury broker. And again, it comes with a willingness to invest in myself, in my clients, and in my business. And they may sound insignificant. I promise you they are not. Here are a few examples. I am a member of the Maroon Creek Club. So the Maroon Creek Club is a private club. It's both golf, tennis, I guess social as well. And that is, a pretty significant membership fee. It pales in membership fee by comparison to the Aspen Mountain Club. So the Aspen Mountain Club is on top of Aspen Mountain. For your viewers, I'm pointing to Aspen Mountain from my office. And on top of the mountain is a private club. This entitles you to have lunch. By the way, you're paying for it. So yes, I get a ski
You
locker,
get the rights to get up there and have lunch.
pretty much, and pay for it.
And you're still
And
paying for it when you get up there.
100%.
Love it.
But it's not walking through the traditional ski chalet or mountain cafeteria, if you will. It is certainly tablecloths and you are being served. And, for those who like to partake, there's wines, et cetera, et cetera. Why am I a member at this insanely expensive club? Because every other table has either an existing client of mine or a potential client of mine. These are the ultra high net worth people who come to Aspen. It is a client or potential client rich environment.
Well, so what's interesting is one of the biggest challenges I see real estate agents have in general is they can't decide what they're going to sell. In your market, you may a small enough market, you know what you're going to sell. And then the next thing is they think they know what they're going to sell, but they forget it's important to be in front of the people and have relationships with the people they're going to sell to. And then when you get out there and you're having lunch next to your past and future clients, they need to actually know you're the best in the world back to the magazines and the emails. Now, you're not the only person who's competing for this business, and you've got a few other people who are going at this pretty aggressively as well. How do you maintain your status? Like, what is maybe the easiest thing about it, and what is the most challenging thing about it?
So there's 850 brokers in this market, and I compete on a regular basis with two others. So I would say that the three of us are responsible for X% of the business. I don't know what it is, Jerry, and then certainly
It's
a
over
very
half.
high percentage of the luxury business. And both of the people who I compete with, both these brokers, aren't successful by mistake. They also are talented. Throughout my career, I used to compete with one broker in particular who pretty much has retired, but we had a great working relationship. Of the two that I compete with now, I have a very good working relationship with one of them.
Well, I think you guys tease each other. We had some great conversations in the past about that I loved.
I give when one of these somebody does a big deal in this town, I reach out and congratulate them. And you know what? Not everything that you do has to be strategic. Not everything that you do needs to have some fashion of potential reciprocity. I mean, be yourself, be a good person, and, look at the long game. So for me, I also, look, I am the title sponsor of Aspen Art Crush. That's another group of, people who collect contemporary art. That's another group of potential or existing
Well,
clients.
that taps into other networks that one of the biggest things about getting in a deal is it a lot of times you hear people talk about how they're pitching for it now. I find that the biggest way to get in front of a deal, the bigger they are, is about knowing about them sooner. So when you're going through a network like artists, it's not always obvious who's coming to the resort yet, except that they're going to have money. So in that network, you're going to be in front of people sooner than the competitors or anyone else might be, to be identified as the person and to identify the future clients and transactions to become the broker for them.
Correct. And I'll tell you something else, everybody listening. The last thing that you want to do is pretend to be somebody you're not. So if you have a little bit of knowledge in art and a little bit of knowledge in travel and a little bit of knowledge in wine and a little bit of knowledge in finance, whatever the case may be, you know, never uh, out, don't lead people to believe you know more than you do. Okay. I remember I had a ranch listed for sale, 11,600 acres in Meeker, Colorado, 2 hours from here. The last thing I'm going to do is pretend to be John Dutton. Okay. I am not going to pretend to be a cowboy. That's not who I am.
Now, that's a fictional character.
And a lot of real estate brokers are fictional characters. So, um, and I'm sure 9 out of 10 people have watched Yellowstone and they get it. But the point is, you don't want to pretend to be something that you're not. If I showed up in chaps and spurs, okay, there couldn't be anything less authentic. So it's really important to be who you are. And look, anybody who has the wherewithal, I think at that point in time, the ranch was listed for $55 million to spend that type of money. The seller had an option. He could either go with a cowboy or go with somebody who has high net worth clients and clientele. You have to know how to speak to these people. And the way you know how to speak is by listening. All right. Our business success is based to a certain extent on empathy. It's understanding your clients, know where they're coming from, and then you're able to treat them accordingly. You're going to know what resonates with that buyer, with that seller. So important.
I think with time, you learn more and more of what to listen for. And a lot of people don't really know how to listen. And sometimes we think we're listening and we're not. What is listening to you and what do you listen for?
So every person's circumstance is a little bit different, whether a buyer or a seller. In addition, if the buyer is a couple or a family, and the seller is a buyer in a family, you can have two different opinions, a husband and wife, a husband and husband, a wife and wife, a family, whatever the heck it is. Not everybody is necessarily in agreement. I remember at $100 million listing, and it was an aggressive ask for what it was. And we all knew that. But at $100 million, we were going to receive significant press, and we went out at 100 million, and there were, so in Aspen, we have two pretty specific selling seasons, winter and summer, and then we have shoulder seasons in between. But once you've run those two seasons, you've got a pretty good understanding of where you're priced and market feedback. So I received an offer. I don't remember where the offer was. I don't know, maybe it was $100 million listing, and maybe the offer was 50 million bucks, something like that. And the seller, the patriarch, so it was the dad and then three adult children. And the dad was of the opinion, not to counter. And I was able to get him to counter, and we did. And we eventually got to 65 million, and they were ready to walk. And I said, look, we all know that we had an aspirational price at $100 million. We also know that if you're going to do a price reduction, it has to be of significance or it's a waste of time. I actually canvassed everybody. Where do you think we would be? We had an 85, an 80, and then we had a 75. I said, I'm in agreement. 75 is the number. So now we're at 65. You would have gone to 75. At 75, you would give a discount. So if you gave 10% off, that's $7.5 million, call it 8. So now we're at 67. And we've got a deal here at 65. We actually going to roll the dice for 2 or 3 additional $1 million. In addition, there's 4 of you. So patriarch, you're not taking it. So 3 people splitting $65 million in pre-tax dollars. This is a no-brainer. And we eventually got the deal done at the 65. My point is, when you say, what do you hear and how do you listen? I understood that everybody in that room may have had a different opinion. The patriarch may have had, some sort of an ego. Hey, we're at 100 and now we're accepting 65. How do you address that? Well, we know you would have gone to 75. And then each kid, young adult, had a different philosophy. But when you came down to the dollars and cents and post-tax dollars and what you can do with money today, opportunity cost, that resonated. I could have had a different seller and it could have been a completely different scenario. So
Mhm.
you have to know where your client is coming from, what will resonate with that client, and then convey a narrative accordingly.
Well, it's something I think that's really powerful that we forget when we're in it, or a lot of agents, and especially when they're even seasoned agents, forget is something that you do well. And everybody, when you listen to this or listen to this again, is you actually take the time. When you're in the conversation, it's easy to jump to defensiveness. It's easy to get desperate. It's easy to start like, I can't believe how many agents just offer up commission because they're afraid of losing a deal. And in your conversation, it's okay, where are we now? And you even noted how you walked through the logistics of it. You thought about where everybody might stand. And before you even walk them through the opportunity that this really was, you ask them where they stood right now, what they thought right now. Well, if we reduce this, what would we go to? What would this really look like? And get them in that conversation. And that also gives them a sense of being heard. How do you know when you really hear them? And sometimes you're wrong. And usually you know because they may get a little upset. But how do you navigate that when that happens? And how do you know when it's happening to diffuse it quickly?
So there's an old expression in real estate, a buyer's a liars. So a buyer, if you're representing them, they may say, I've got to be in walking distance to the gondola and I'm not going to spend greater than $15 million and I need a minimum of 5 bedrooms, et cetera, et cetera. And then throughout the process, they see there's so much more value if they're willing to be a mile out from the gondola instead of walking distance. And if they go 4 bedrooms instead of 5 bedrooms, but make one a bunk room, that will save them X. And hey, 10 million or 15 million only bought me this, so 20 million. So we say tongue in cheek, buyers are liars. I think that, yes, the single greatest thing in my eyes that you can do with your clients is have them understand that we're in it together. So we are
Yeah,
shoulder to shoulder. We're on the same team. It's a collaborative effort. Your opinion matters. And together, we're going to buy this property. Together, we're going to sell this property. And that kind of takes that fight, right? That inherent, he's a broker, he's just looking for compensation, just wants to get a deal done, kind of takes that off the table. If in fact, and you said it, Jerry, you can put yourself into the shoes of the buyer and the seller, that you understand where they're coming from. I think brokers very often will lose sight of the fact that no matter how successful a buyer or seller may be, it's not that they don't do one real estate transaction after
exactly.
another like we do. So there are nuances to the Aspen market and other markets that need to be massaged as you are working with your client.
Exactly. It's Warren Claff calls it, I quote him a lot, but he calls it situational hierarchy. You might be working with a billionaire, but out on the golf course or out on the ski slopes, in that situation, the instructor, the pro, has the hierarchy. In the deal, as the broker, you have the hierarchy. Now, the counter to that is you'll hear your real estate agent say, but I told that, I told them how it was going to be and how it has to be. I'm the professional. No, 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 no. It's like go back and listen to that conversation that you have with your clients to stop, pause, gauge where they are, and have that conversation to get that deal done. Now, I would imagine that you're winning business and continuing to win business and stay at the top through your career looks a little bit like that in your conversations too, or you tell us.
Ask me that question again because I didn't
So,
understand.
when you're negotiating deals, you have one way of methodically bringing them through it to keep them so that it's not talking at them or not telling them what they have to do, and simultaneously hearing them and maintaining professionalism. What does it look like when you're pitching a deal, or I don't know if you would call it that, winning business? What do those conversations look like?
Well, I think that it goes back to having your potential client comfortable with you and trusting you. And it's a little bit easier for a successful broker with a track record versus somebody new to the industry. So, as you know, I mentor brokers at Compass around the country. And If a broker doesn't have listings and they're going on a listing pitch, what do they say? Okay, everybody listening, I'm about to give you a pearl here, which works against me. And what you can say if you don't have a lot of listings is, hey, look, Steven's got 25 listings at $1 billion. I know I don't have a lot of listings, but that works in your favor because you're going to be the single greatest client I have. You're going to have my complete attention and I won't be distracted and you're important to me, et cetera, et cetera.
I don't know about that. I don't know
Well,
about
listen,
that. They,
they've got to say something.
yeah,
It's like when there's a broker in Aspen and they don't have any listings, but they want to advertise. So what do? They show a picture of themselves in the magazine or the newspaper, looking good
that,
and talking about their
well,
character.
people who fake, nobody wants the fictional character, not for the realtor, to your point.
Well, that's
Yeah, I
why
agree.
the
You
successful
definitely
brokers,
want the real thing.
yeah, and that's why successful brokers continue on that path of success.
But I want to express an opinion with you because I think I want your brains in this on this topic too. That shit doesn't work. You think it works because everybody doesn't want if they're giving the guy the business who's just the nice guy and not distracted, they're giving the business to the loser. Unless they really know that guy actually knows the market and they really know that guy's actually sharp and maybe if I like because everybody can say
Right. I
that.
mean, so
Anybody can say Steven's busy, I'm not, but that's not going to make you the right choice.
they have nothing else to say, so that's about as good as it's going to get. That
The
said, I
best is
will.
why this is because you've been an agent forever. Here's what they can know the market though. They can know people like you. They can have our conversations to give them insight into the market that they wouldn't have otherwise. Because to your point, that's better than faking it. That's better going in there and pretending like you're somebody you're not, or having some getting your picture taken in a fancy car. Like that means something. That's just gross.
I agree with you. So there are brokers throughout my career who have asked me to help them win a listing and then co-broker it with me because they'd rather get a percentage of something than nothing. Okay. That's another approach for a broker who is breaking in.
That is the approach that 99% of the agents that make this show, brokers like you, that's a big way that I've seen these guys succeed is understanding who to align yourself with. And it doesn't mean you can be lazy and just bring some agent to an appointment. You got to know your stuff and own it.
So back in the day here, every other ski instructor had their broker's license and listen, they have a client who can afford a private instructor. And then in turn, they would be their real estate broker. That ship has pretty much sailed.
Mm.
I think that friendships and ski instructors are kind of falling by the wayside as far as being a real estate professional. The commodity here is just too valuable, too expensive, and often makes up a big enough percentage of the owner's net worth that they are going to entrust their real estate with somebody who lives and breathes it. When I mentor people, I say all the time, look, you've got to walk into a room and you can't be Jerry Metcalf, Metcalf mom. This can't be Bridger, whatever, bartender. Okay. You've got to
Right.
walk in a room and be perceived as a real estate professional.
Yeah.
I mean, this is
Yeah.
real, but Jerry, it wasn't always that way. Not here. Okay. Every other bartender or every other,
Oh, they still are. They still are, aren't they? I mean,
there's
like,
a
I haven't been to
handful.
Aspen in a few years, but every single ski instructor and bartender I met had a real estate license. It's crazy. And
Not
I don't want to
necessarily a
discourage people.
driver's license.
Exactly. Exactly. So I don't know if you wanted to add to that, but I want to ask you a few questions and I want to go into final three. You kind of sent me a
Okay.
few questions that we've covered, but I want to bounce them back to you to make sure we've covered all the good stuff and the fun stuff. And then I'm going to ask you three more. So we're talking 7 questions. Number
Okay.
one, what, if you want to sum it up for us, really makes Aspen different from other markets?
Well, other than the fact that we're very expensive, what makes us very expensive? Look, First of all, we're as busy in the summer as we are in the winter. This is now a summer destination as well as a winter destination. We have 4 mountains, so that's one very compelling component, so we have something for everybody. Number 2, we're a true community. We're not a ski resort per se. I mean, I love Ty Stockton. He's the equivalent to me in Vail. I mean, the guy is so talented, so smart, comes from the world of finance, one of my favorite colleagues. I'm not living in Vail. Okay. So Vail to me is a ski destination, not true community. But what we have here is our culture. Our culture is what separate. Look, if somebody wants, I can show on occasion a 2-bedroom, 2-bath condo. It happens. And a bedroom, 2-bath, 2-bedroom condo that's 1,250 square feet. The asking price here is probably $6 million.
Is
Could
that
be
crazy?
7.
Yeah.
Okay. So the point is, hey, buyer, you're a nice guy, nice family. Here's the deal. You can probably spend that $6 million and own a single family home in Sun Valley or Jackson Hole or Telluride. Go call Bill Fandel. I love Bill.
Love
But the
Bill,
fact
right? The
is,
anti, yeah.
if you're my
And they both
favorites.
have episodes on the Jerry Metcalf podcast.
Of course
I
they
think
do.
Ty's got a couple of episodes. Yeah.
Well, you tell him next time you talk to him, I want a shout out. So anyway, the point is these buyers, if they're coming here strictly to ski, you've got these other places. But it's the culture here, okay? It's Theater Aspen, Jazz Aspen, our music festival,
Our
classical music from some of the most talented people, musicians there are. There's the Ideas Festival. We now have some of the premier restaurants in the country, shopping. I mean, it is a cultural mecca. And that's what separates us from Steamboat Springs. I mean, it's
yeah.
just different, and you don't need to come here and pay a premium. You can go somewhere else. But if those things are important to you, that's what separates Aspen from all other markets.
And that keeps so many people coming in the summer. Now, I don't want us to run out of time. 3 more, and then we do have the final 3. How do you build your business? We talked about that a little, but did you want to add anything or sum it up?
I mean, I think if anybody was listening and they wanted a takeaway is reinvesting in yourself, in your business. For me, I have 3 brokers who support my business. Each one is more talented than the next. I'll put them up against anybody else. And then it's what I said earlier, that incremental sales perspective, okay? A willingness to bite the bullet, spend big dollars, whether it's a membership to a club, a sponsorship to an event, advertising in the newspaper or the magazine, and no, one incremental sale, one sale that wouldn't have taken place otherwise will pay for that marketing, advertising, membership many times over.
And every sale, even the sales that don't happen, when you're doing it right, always lead to more deals. Knowing your market, knowing your people. What is your single greatest strength?
I think it's putting myself into the shoes of the person I'm speaking with.
And that could be the answer to the next question, which is you'll laugh when you hear it. What differentiates you from other brokers?
So it's work ethic, creativity, and I use this word and it goes to what I just said, which is empathy. It's understanding who I'm speaking with. And the fact is, everyone is different. Some people are investing purely in a lifestyle. Other people are investing financially. Others are investing in a combination of both. Fact of the matter is, you can probably make, although I don't know when this is airing, but today's stock market is a little challenging to say the least. You can probably make better pure financial investments, but you are not skiing on shares of Apple and you're not fly fishing or mountain biking on a Damien Hirst. This is an investment in your lifestyle. Most people here, multi generational, grandparents, parents, grandchildren, a meeting place for everybody to be with one another. It's an extraordinary investment in life.
Now we're going to go to the final three. Number one,
Oh, yes.
if there is a greatest resource in building your success, what is it?
If there is a greatest resource,
In the building of your success, what would you say that it is?
so I flourish in a smaller community. I don't know if I could enjoy this success in New York City or Los Angeles or Miami or Chicago or Houston or Dallas. Do I think I would be a successful real estate broker in those places? Yes. But my willingness to give to people, and I mean it. I mean, forget about whatever donations I make and whatever sponsorships I do. And my wife was the chair of Aspen Country Day School. She's currently the chair of Theater Aspen. I've got 2 children who were born here. People say, "Are you a local, Stephen?" I never call myself a local. My kids are local. They were both born here. I've been here 30 years and don't refer to myself as a local. So I think that a smaller community with that provides me the ability to interact face to face with people on a regular basis has been one of the tenets of my success.
Wow. I love that answer. Number two, if there's a book that we just have to read that might have changed your life, what is it? Or your career, but what is it? The book.
So, by the way, anybody listening, these questions weren't provided to me ahead of time.
Of course not. The conversation wouldn't be nearly so interesting.
So, I am guilty of reading fiction.
Love it.
So, I recently, God, I hope I get this author's name right, I've been reading these novels by an author named Kristen Hanna.
Okay.
And the commonality of the 4 novels I've read, um, which are Nightingale, the woman, uh, the Great Alone,
These sound
and
like romance novels.
they're not. Her protagonist is always a
Yeah.
very strong woman.
Oh, I love it. So what do you, I'm looking her novels up now. So what do you love? So yeah, I see it now. The Nightingale, the women is one of them.
So the Nightingale and the women, those are must reads. Everybody,
Really?
okay, 100%. And they're strong women are who she writes about. And
Love it.
I call it's almost factional, Jerry, in the regard that it's fiction, but it's based on facts. So the woman takes place in the Vietnam War.
Oh, wow.
Nightingale takes place during German occupied France. And boy, so if you think about it, it's almost like real estate. It's what you said earlier. It's substance, it's content, right? So we'll call that in a novel the storyline, and then image. I'm pushing the envelope here a little bit in real estate. We'll call that writing ability. So not as much the story as the prose. And very often there's a beautiful writer, and then there's also a beautiful writer who has a great storyline. Pat Conroy, great in both, and so is Kristen Hannis. It didn't change my career in any regard. Did I learn anything? I've always respected women because it comes from my
Well, you have
wife.
to in this business. That's what I love about
It's
this
not even
business.
that. My
Yeah.
wife, okay, so and my, to a certain extent, my mother. Neither one was looking for the spotlight. Okay, they were strong, understated women who were happy to be supportive, but when push came to shove and there was a real issue or a problem, these are the people who
Oh, it
remedy.
always comes down to the women. Always.
You won't get an argument from me.
I think the most important thing is that we women just own it and remember it. So what, like, one more question. I think you kind of said it, but I just want to get more because I love this. What keeps you coming back to these books? What is the thing that, like, what is it that draws you? What is it that fuels your soul to keep you reading these books?
I there's another book that I loved that was called, I read it years ago, Shadow of the Wind. There was another book, The Fountainhead.
I lean in a little bit so we can hear you and so it doesn't mess
So
up our
Shadow of the
all right,
Wind
yeah.
was
Shadow of the Wind.
initially written in Spanish. Carlos Ruiz Zafron was the
Now, do you speak
author.
Spanish?
Do I speak Spanish?
Yeah.
No,
I'm
very
learning
little.
Spanish, so I have to
A
ask.
poquito.
Anyway,
It was, thank God, translated to English. Wouldn't have read it. The Fountainhead, Ayn Rand. I mean, so these
now you're
characters,
talking. Yeah.
right?
I'm gonna have to read
I
these
mean,
other books now. Yeah. I
well,
love it.
the characters are, in Shadow of the Wind, the character coming at Boys of the Boat. Okay, these are people who come of age. These are people who beat the odds. And it's not always with an economic or a financial win. It can be a winning character. And so I think that I like seeing people navigate turbulent waters and succeed. I would say that's the commonality in most of these books.
Interesting. That's like, that's what every book is that, but I do love that. If I see a book about a person or a now it's got to be the real thing for me. I've got to watch it and then I learn everything about them and I'll give you the whole bio and what's real and what's not, right? It's just, what is it? Is it that for you, is it that you're learning something from their life that you can bring back to yours, or it's just fun?
Yes, both, but not as much fun as, yes, learning, but that's not why I do it. I do it and then I'm appreciative of that component. I read it and then I'm
Doesn't it
pleased.
give you, I mean, this isn't even about books, this podcast, but I think it helps us get to know you. Does it not keep you, it's funny how when you stay around the right people and you keep the right perspective, we might undermine or not appreciate the power of that enough in our lives.
Look, I give an example all the time. So, one of the things in real estate in a small community that you don't do is you don't get on a soapbox about anything, including, and most importantly, politics, because you can alienate 50% of your clientele.
And there's just not enough to
So,
alienate 50% of them.
so I think that I give credit to people, even if they have an opposing view to me regarding anything, if they can articulate their view in a manner that makes sense. So there are people who I disagree with, but when I hear their view and their perspective, it's not that they necessarily are changing my mind, but I honor where they're
Yeah.
Let's say there's two people. One's pro-life, one's pro-choice. I understand the pro-life perspective and I understand the pro-choice perspective. And these are people, if they're outspoken, who are deeply rooted in their feelings and they are entitled. So as long as the pro-life person isn't bombing an abortion clinic,
Yeah.
okay, then or whatever the pro-choice person would be doing, you know, conversely, that's fine. That's what makes this country great is differences of opinion and the ability to articulate your different opinion and share thoughts. And maybe at some point in time, we can find common ground. I can't believe this is what we're discussing.
Well, what I love about it, and here's where it is relevant to real estate, is two things. Number one is sharing that helps everybody remember. As real estate agents, very often what I see bring some of the most talented and even in some occasions the best or could have been the best real estate agents is getting stuck in that rut of you have to listen to me and this is how it has to be or it's going to fail. And if you can't first have the ability to hear other people and really empathize and understand where they're coming from, you can't go on that journey that we talked about at the beginning of this conversation to help people truly get to the best place for for what the truth really is and the outcome they want. And I would add something to that, whether it's in the topic of what we just talked about pro-life or pro-choice, or whether it's about real estate. I'm going to bring some Martin Luther King out. But he said, a lot of times we look at extremism. And this may sound like a political conversation, but it's funny how politics bring up emotion. And guess what else does? Our home, our family, and our money, which is what real estate is. And when we're doing this business, what are we extremists of? It's not whether we an extreme. Let me get to Martin Luther King. The choice isn't whether we're an extremist or not. The choice is whether we're an extremist of love or whether we're an extremist of hate. The choice is, are we going to be the extremist? Are we going to be focused on empathy and perspective? Or are we going to get stuck in our own rut and lose out because of it?
So my favorite quote is from Teddy Roosevelt. And what he said, and it is important in my business in this town where I am surrounded by, people will say, oh, Stephen, you're highly successful. I'm not successful. My clients are successful. Everybody here is smarter, better looking, better athlete, more successful. And what Teddy Roosevelt said is comparison is the thief of joy. And I remind myself of that every day. If you live your life comparing yourself to the most successful brokers, everybody who is smart enough to be listening to Jere's podcast, you are going to live an unhappy life. So for me, you've asked a lot of questions. Obviously, it's an interview or it's a conversation. But the fact of the matter is, you have to love what you do. So it takes passion, it takes compassion. You can't fake it because your clients are smarter than you may give them credit. And if you're faking it, it's not going to work. You have to have
People
long-term
can
vision.
smell it, right?
Oh my gosh. And you need
They're either going
long-term
to
vision.
run from it or they're going to take advantage of it. But either way, it's not a good place to be.
And the brokers who are up against it and haven't done a deal in a while, and then they are going to cut corners or they're going to say what needs to be said to get the deal done and make misrepresentations, no matter how big or how small, you're going to have a short career. So you need to have long-term vision. And remember, I started with nothing. I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just saying I've been where others are and they're
Yeah.
trying to become, successful in this industry.
And everybody listening to this, go back and listen to the former, because you talk about being in the car with your client and how your first client and how it all went down. I love it.
I remember that story. So that was me dropping her off after dinner. And I knew that she was building a house and I was dropping her off at her existing home. And I said, aren't you building a house? And she said, it was my wife and I, aren't you building a house? Yes. Well, aren't you going to have to sell this one? Yes. Well, can I sell it for you? I mean, my voice went up 8 octaves. And, that was a seminal moment. That was really the turning point of my career. She was a person of notoriety. And when I sold that home and they saw who I represented in this town, it went a long way.
It made a difference.
That's an alarm, Jere.
Well, here's the last question. If there's one thing that you would hope that we take away from this conversation or this interview, if we don't take away anything else, what do you hope that it is?
That we maintain our relationship.
Thank you. What about everybody else listening? Is that it?
I had an option just then.
Thank
I could
you.
give the answer that everybody wanted to hear,
Yeah.
or I could give the true answer. Everybody listening, you can do with what we're talking about as you see fit. I have and it's really for Compass brokers, but anybody can go to my YouTube channel. I have no idea what my YouTube channel is.
But I bet you if you put
What
your
is it?
name in there, they'll find it.
Real estate with Stephen Shane. And I have 120 some odd episodes discussing actual real estate things that have taken place that I think are helpful to seasoned brokers and new brokers alike.
And you're the best storyteller too, so it's awesome.
This has been so much fun.
It's been awesome. Thank you, Stephen. Thanks for listening to the Jere Metcalf podcast. To get show notes, get other access to other episodes, and to send any guest requests, go to jmpodcast.com.